you, sir, for being so patient. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Peter Fusaro. He wears many hats, and what struck me was he's a New York Times best-selling author. So I think that's really cool. So please join me in giving him a round of applause. And when I asked Peter, what are you going to talk about? He said, I'm going to keep it simple. So much like an author. I know sometimes I write and I get long-winded, but sometimes I keep it short. So he's going to talk about how sustainable development goals, clean energy, clean water are interconnected. The mic is all yours. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Next slide, please. I spent 45 years on sustainability as a policymaker, as an entrepreneur, as a professor, and as an advisor. Today I advise part of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, AB Group here in New York, Oslo, and Singapore to deploy Norwegian technology in emerging markets. Next slide, please. I'm only going to focus on 3 SDGs: climate action, clean energy, and clean water. Next slide, please. So we all know this slide. When I started my journey working on climate change 30 years ago, we weren't going to get to 450 parts per million. We're now at 415, and if we go beyond that, we have real problems. So the game has been 450 ppm, 2 degrees C. Next slide, please. So here's the climate reality. We have 57 carbon markets in the world today. I work very assiduously on implementing AB 32, the California climate law. I've worked in the EU. I've worked on the Kyoto Protocol, on clean development mechanism projects. We don't have one price for carbon. What has worked, though, is cap and trade. Here in New York, we used to have an acid rain problem. That no longer exists due to the sulfur dioxide allowance program, which has been in effect since 1990. You used to go to Denver, there was a brown cloud. You used to go to LA, it was 180 ozone non-attainment days. Those problems are also fixed through markets. So the surprise is markets work. Next slide, please. But the timetable is we're combusting more fossil energy today than ever before. So our carbon footprint continues to grow each year, and that combustion goes to the stratosphere for basically 100 years. So carbon capture is not commercial. It is very expensive and not yet commercially deployable. We need to scale today's technology and deploy more money. Next slide, please. So this is from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. We deployed $330 billion last year. Now some of that is more projects because wind and solar are cheaper. Solar energy is 90% cheaper than 9 years ago. But the reality is we need to do $1 trillion a year, every year in clean energy. Next slide, please. So I'm on the board of a company called Grid Market. Grid Market did the Marcus Garvey public housing over in Brooklyn, creating solar, battery storage, fuel cell storage. Today, Grid Market is now deployed in Palau in the Pacific and Samoa. And the partners there are the governments of those island nations as well as EarthX to create 45% renewable energy using solar and energy storage. Why is this important? Because there are 55 island nations in the world, and they are on the front line of climate change. So you can move to renewables much more quickly than you imagine. Next slide, please. I'm also helping a company called Folio Water in Bangladesh. Folio, through Columbia Tech Ventures, we mentor young emerging managers. And this, I went to Carnegie Mellon. Ironically, this technology came out of Carnegie Mellon University, a husband and wife team, where they basically created a filter using nanotechnology that reduces 99.999% of the pathogens in water. The addressable market of the 3 billion working people earning to $2 to $10 a day. The cost of this is 20 cents for 20 liters. These are reusable filters. So think of this as a Melita filter with nanotechnology. Very inexpensive, and the reality is Unilever is helping them in Bangladesh today, and the reality is this will clean up dirty water for 3 billion people, and they can drink it. It's very simple technology. Next slide, please. So what's on the horizon? This opportunity to change how we do business due to the SDGs and finance has finally arrived. I don't know why it arrived this year, but it arrived this year. And I just saw yesterday the first SDG-related fund being launched. So you're going to see more innovation and technology breaking through and addressing climate change. But the game is to scale that technology. The game is small technology like folio water, or large technology like solar and wind farms. Here in New York, the Norwegians are now going to be building offshore wind in New York State. By the way, New York State has a Green New Deal, which nobody seems to know about. So I say green is the New Deal. And this will create jobs, something politicians understand. I worked at the Department of Energy headquarters in DC in the 70s. I was in the mayor's office here in the 80s building the first energy efficiency programs. All politicians care about is economic development, AKA create jobs, and these are well-paid jobs. In India, many years ago, I worked with an NGO which took the kerosene wicker lamp out of the hut for 25,000 families and replaced that with a solar collector, a battery, and LED lamp. We did that for 25,000 families between $45 and $65 a kit. One of the Indian professors called this the bicycle mechanics approach. We were Green NGO of the Year in 2010. Very simple technology, but what it did, it created an opportunity for children to learn at night with 5 hours of lighting, and for women to sew and do cottage industries. Not everything has to be high tech. Sometimes low tech is the way forward. And I'm going to end on this note. I also work in the hydrogen economy, the emerging economy, which people think, oh, it's 10 years off, it's 10 years off. Well, we have something called H2 Accelerator that Shell and Toyota are funding here in the Northeast. It's between Greentown Labs in Boston and the New York Accelerator here in Brooklyn. What we're looking at is new technology that does not create any emissions. 21 years ago, I worked on the Prius with Toyota, but I also drove the fuel cell vehicle, which cost $1 million. That car came down and cost to $40,000 4 years ago. That's 25x reduction. All the original equipment manufacturers, Daimler, BMW, Honda, Toyota, GM, can make the cars. What's missing is the infrastructure for those cars. But one of my former clients in Vancouver was running fuel cell hydrogen buses to the Whistler Olympics 7 years ago. Watch out for hydrogen. I'm now seeing folks looking at retrofitting, taking out natural gas, which is CH4, which still has the carbon molecule, and replacing that with hydrogen. Hydrogen has no emissions. It's water vapor. It's H2O. So the game now is investors are looking at the SDGs. It's now time for scale and deployment. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Peter Fusaro, Chairman of Global Change Associates in New York. I spent 45 years working on sustainability as a policymaker, as an entrepreneur, as a technocrat, and now as a financier. Today's panel on the SDGs in finance was focused on how to scale today's technology and commercialize that technology to solve problems, specifically in clean air and clean water. My talk was focused on using technologies of microgrids in island nations using solar and battery technology, as well as using a filtration system for water using a filter that's very affordable in developing countries, costing 20 cents for 20 liters. This takes out the pathogens in water for an addressable market of 2 billion people around the world.